This week at the Rock Health and Wellness Center, and you are listening to Life with Jason Clemmons, DC, coming to you on this Thursday night, November 16th, right here from Lubbock, Texas, at the Rock Health and Wellness Center studios, and on 98.7 FM Walk by Faith Radio and 1420 AM Lubbock Christian Nation. And you guys got us out there. If you want to find us, you can find us. We're on Facebook, we're on YouTube, and we're on X. So I just had a patient just a few minutes ago. She was like, "Well, I don't know when your show is or where to find it." And I was like, "Well, you can find us if you want to find us out there because we're out there." Coach Dykes used to say that when we were at Tech. He's like, he had 100% graduation rate. 100% of the kids that wanted to graduate did, and so that's kind of the way I feel about all of us who get together on this show. I know it's crazy. I know there's a lot of content. I know we come to you every night from 6 to 7, and we're talking about wellness in the middle of a crazy, unhealthy world. We're talking about wellness, but we're just going to keep doing it. And those of us that are hanging out, we're going to get healthier and healthier. And Lord knows that they need us out there. That world is full of people who are not healthy, and so it sure is nice to get out there and see if we can get some of the people that are and get them healthier and keep talking about it. So we've had a great week. We've had a good shows and had good conversation with the shows. It's been a lot of fun this week. We broke down James chapter 1 where we were talking about temptation on Monday, going through that whole series at church, and I'm stealing all their models and taking them and applying them to health and wellness. And so, it's really funny in academics. If you plagiarize, it's supposed to be something negative, but in athletics, if you plagiarize, it's exactly the way you win. And so I came from an athletic background, so I'm just sticking with that idea, and I'm just going to stay with it right there because we're learning from it. We're learning from it, and I know that's good for everybody out there. And so, yeah, we had a good week on Monday, good show on Monday. Tuesdays and Wednesdays show was great. Last night we broke down on our book review night. We broke down The Body, chapter 5 by Bill Bryson, and I wanted to finish it tonight. I know it's a little unusual to carry it on into the Thursday night show, but we only got through part of that chapter on the brain, and so I wanted to kind of revisit that and just share the rest of that chapter right there with you, because I think there's some stuff at the end of the chapter that I think you really would like. So if you're not used to the book review night, we're just going to carry that on and talk about that for a little while. And then I think what I want to do going forward is I really like this Thursday night idea of getting a little bit more technical. We kind of are the show is kind of molding itself as we go through this. We're 2.5 months into the show, and we're kind of molding it, kind of working through the process of it. And I think at least one night a week, it'd be really nice. It'd be fun for me anyway. And I think it would be fun for some of the listeners that want something that's a little bit more technical, that we can really get into the meat and potatoes of things. And so I'm thinking that Thursday nights will be a great night for that. We could get into it. We could get into some real serious technical type stuff and get a little bit deeper with our knowledge, because there's a lot of it out there. And I know that there's probably a hunger for it out there as well. I know that that's the way that I look for it on the groups that I listen to. I'm looking for, I just, you want something. You don't want to waste your time with a show. You don't want to waste your time. You got lots of things to compete with out there, and you don't want to waste your time with the show. And so I'm hoping that maybe we can take Thursday nights and just be a little bit more technical on Thursday nights and break down some things so that you have a deeper understanding of them. So I think that's what we'll start doing. We might get to some of that at the second half of this show and talk about some things that you might not understand or might help you. And so, but I got, first of all, just some of the things that happened in the office today, some of the praises that happened in the office today. We do that right eye test where we come in and we measure you, how your brain is functioning. And we look at some different, 3 different areas that we measure. We measure brain stem activity, we measure parietal lobe activity, and we measure frontal lobe activity by different eye movements, and it gives us an overall score. And I just got finished with one of my guys that started, and when he started, it was like a 67. That was his original score, and um, he improved to a 90. He improved in all of the areas. So he took his score from a 67 to a 90. He took his frontal lobe score from like a 30 something to a 50 something, which is a big deal. If you've been listening to the show for a little bit, you kind of understand how important that frontal lobe is to the way that we function and the way that our brain works and the way that we process our environment and the way that our internal environment works. That frontal lobe is really a big deal. So I was so proud of him. He's worked really hard. He's followed through with everything we've asked him to do. He's really doing a great job. So that was one of the things that I wanted to praise today. I wanted to also, we had some of the people that are doing our nutrition program have sent in some testimonials. And if you want to see them, we post those testimonials on our Rock Nutrition page on Instagram. And so it's the rocknutrition.health on Instagram is where we post those testimonials. And so you can find some of those. There's lots of great recipes that we have on there. There's lots of great information about, just wellness things. Kim tries to post as much as she can. We've got, she's trying to do stuff for this month that gives you better healthy choices for Thanksgiving. And so cranberry sauce, Brussels sprouts with balsamic, green beans with bacon and almonds, sweet potatoes with pecans. There's some recipes right there that they're right there for you. And if you want them, this might make it a little bit better. So it might make your sweet potato casserole with just a little bit healthier than the way that you might have made it in the past. Or you can make some of these green beans with bacon and almonds, and that'd be a great healthy substitute for some of the things that we're going to have, over Thanksgiving. So Kim's doing a great job on that page. She's trying to get you as much information as she can to try to share with you all that nutrition stuff. So it's called the rocknutrition.health, and it's on Instagram, and you guys can look it up if you want to find all kinds of different ideas on there about, she's got one here on magnesium. And if you just kind of scroll down through there, you'll find some of the client testimonials that we've got. And we just have had some really cool results with our nutrition program. And it's really simple. It's not a complicated process. I think the first day is $165, and that includes we go through a whole symptom survey with you. We've got a toxicity report. We've got an in-body scan that we use, a body composition analysis. We do a heart rate variability test. We do a heart sound recorder. We do an omega-6/3 blood work, and so we're gathering a lot of information on that first day. And then once we get the results back from the omega-6/3 test, then we bring you in and set you down and show you everything. We make you a notebook. We tell you everything that's been going on, and then give you some options on some things you can do. We've got recipes that goes along with it. We've got some philosophy on how we eat and try to control insulin. Those things are vital for health. And so we've had people, and then you do not have to be a chiropractic patient to come in and get the nutrition program. If you want to, you're welcome to, and I would highly recommend that. Obviously, I'm a chiropractor. I would recommend that, but you don't have to. You can come in and go through the nutrition program, and we'll make the recommendations on the supplements that you are lacking on based on the data that we find. So that's what you want is you want to be able to, because people ask me, well, should I take vitamin D or should I take vitamin C or should I what supplements should I take? And what I would have found out with doing this nutrition program is that people are getting supplements from all over the place. Like, I know that's a $1 billion industry out there, but it's just amazing to me how many places we go to get supplements. We'll go through the all of the different models. Like, I mean, we'll listen to anybody on the internet. We'll just listen to somebody that we randomly found. We'll just follow some group, and then or um I don't know what I was watching. Oh, I was watching Quigley Down Under last night. So Leslie and Caitlin went to the thing called Holiday Happenings here in Lubbock, and it's big. All the girls get together. It's a shop. It's fun. I don't know. There's a bunch of boutiques and stuff get together. It's a fancy little deal, and it's very popular with the women to go to the holiday happenings. And so the girls asked me if I wanted to go with them, and I said I would, but I'd be fine if if they didn't need me, I'd be fine without it. So after the show last night, I got to go home, and on my way home, I called my parents and asked them what they were doing. And Dad said that they were getting ready to watch Quigley Down Under. I don't know if you've ever seen that show or not, but it's a pretty good Western show. It's got Tom Selleck in it. And so I went home, and Leslie had made me a bowl of soup, made some soup when I got home. And so I ate some soup and watched Quigley Down Under last night after the show, which was a kind of a nice little break by myself. I had like an hour, 2 hours or something like that. That was just me by myself at home. And it was kind of nice to just have that little break right there. But it's commercials. It was on Grit, whatever. That's the first time I think I've ever watched Grit channel, but it was on there. And every commercial was like a Medicare advertisement of some sort, or some sort of supplement group, or some sort of pain pill you could take, or some sort of thing. And it's just like, really, like, that's where we're going with our health. Like, that's what we've got. I mean, there are guys like me in every town across America. There are guys like me in the towns, in the cities, everywhere across America that are working every day to try to keep their communities healthy and well. And a lot of my patients that I've found out since we started doing this nutrition program, a lot of my patients are listening to some infomercial or some commercial on TV and buying some supplement from somebody on TV. And the person on TV has no idea whether or not you need that supplement or you don't. They don't have any idea why exactly your body's not functioning that way. They don't have any idea what's causing you to be that way. They don't layer it on two or three different ways for you. And those are the things that your local people can do for you. The local people that break your nutrition down, like, they'll really help you on those things. And you're a person to them. You're not just somebody that joined on their on their infomercial or whatever. So that's what we do. And we've gotten some people just straightened out just a little bit. Not major overhaul changes, but just a few little minor, like, look, you probably don't want to drink all those sodas all day long, right? Those sodas are killing you. That's not something that you want to do. We can change. One of the girls just simply changed. She started eating things like almonds and pistachios and macadamias instead of eating chips. It was one little change like that made a huge difference for her, just by changing to a healthy snack instead of an unhealthy snack. And she's doing fantastic. She's the one. She's got her testimonial right there on the page, and she says right here, she says, the first thing I noticed is that my brain felt clearer. I didn't feel so foggy or mentally distracted. Another thing I've noticed is that my joints don't ache as much. Yeah, it's like that. That's kind of what I'm saying. Like, you don't need a supplement to solve your joint pain problem. You don't need a treatment for your joint pain problem. If you just clear up your inflammation, then you won't have your joint pain problem in the first place. Like if you just change from empty calories that are high in omega 6s to a substantial calorie that is lower in omega 6s and add your omega 3 with it, like you'll decrease your joint pain all over your body and you'll get your brain to function better. So um, that's just one of the things that I thought I would share with you. If you want to find out some of that information, therocknutrition.health on Instagram is a place for you there that you can go and learn about nutrition. And you can also come make an appointment if you want us to help you with your nutrition. There's absolutely no reason in 2023 for you to be sick if you don't want to be sick. And we actually did a drawing today, and one of our patients won a drawing. We ran a question through our TVs here in the office, our slideshow that we have in the office, and it asked the question. It was about insulin, and the answer was insulin. And one of the girls, you had to text insulin to a number, and so she texted the insulin. She won the prize, and it was a $25 gift certificate to Healthy Essentials, and she won that through the nutrition program. And she'd never been to not Healthy Essentials, to Nature's Tonic. Healthy Essentials is not open anymore. To Nature's Tonic, it's one of our nutrition stores here in town. And I asked her, I said, have you been to Nature's Tonic before? She said, no, I've never been in one of those stores ever before. And I was like, well, wow, now that you're a wellness patient, you can go into a vitamin shop, into a wellness type store, and get you some nutrition for yourself. That might change all the difference for you. And it's interesting that I think she's as old as I am, and she'd never been in one of those before. So good things are happening at the Rock Health and Wellness Center. Good things are happening for people who want to get healthy. And so that's what we're trying to do on this show. And I know you guys out there want to get healthier. And a lot of you are working at it, and a lot of you are seeing the rewards from that. You're persevering, as we talked about on Monday. So let's get into chapter 5, the end of chapter 5 in the book, because we were working on we ended the book last night. And so this is Bill, The Body, A Guide for Occupants by Bill Bryson, best-selling author of A Short History of Nearly Everything. And so he's a great author. I love this guy. He's got a great sense of humor. But we ended last night talking about the eyes and how the eyes send 100 billion signals to the brain every second, which is kind of amazing. But that's only part of the story. When you see something, only about 10% of the information comes from the optic nerve. Other parts of your brain have to deconstruct the signals, recognize faces, interpret movements, identify danger. In other words, the biggest part of seeing isn't receiving visual images, it's making sense of them. And that's where we ended last night, talking about how when you see something, your brain is getting data, but then your brain is processing all that information, and then you're making sense of it. And so it's really pretty cool. For each visual input, it takes a tiny but perceptible amount of time, about 200 milliseconds, 1/5 of a second, for the information to travel along the optic nerves into the brain to be processed and interpreted. Man, can you imagine how fast that is? Like it's just moving through your head. It's like you see it, it hits your eyeball. All you got to do is turn real quick. Like wherever you are right now, just turn and look at something. It's like, man, just think about that image just all of a sudden hit your eyeball and is traveling at 1/5 of a second. It's how long it takes for you to hit that. It travel through there and process it, interpret it. It's a fast thing. 1/5 of a second is not a trivial span of time when a rapid response is required. To step back from an oncoming car, or say to avoid a blow to the head, to help us deal with this fractional lag, the brain does a truly extraordinary thing. It continuously forecasts what the world will be like a fifth of a second from now. How cool is that? It's continuing. I've always been amazed personally at how sometimes you can, like when as kids, how many of us fell and hit the edge of the fireplace or hit the edge of the coffee table or something like that and have like a little scar right up here on the top of our eye. And it's right on the bone on the top of the eye. And it's like so many times when kids fall, they fall and bump their head. And how many times actually do you fall and poke your eye out? Like, why don't we ever fall and hit the edge of the fireplace and actually poke our eye out? Now I know some people do that. So if you're one of those people and you poked your eye out by doing that, sorry about that. But for the most of us, when we fall, we actually forecast what's going on in front of us 1/5 of a second before we get there. And so now we have the ability to just move our head. We could just turn our head just a touch right before we hit that fireplace. And it's like, man, that's an interesting thing. That's how smart your brain is. That's how amazing your brain is and how amazing your nervous system is. It's like, I'll let you fall and bump your head. I'll let you fall and get a scar right above your eye, but I'm not going to let you fall and hit the corner of that table on your eye. I'm going to move your body away from that so that that doesn't happen. We spend our whole lives, in other words, living in a world that doesn't quite yet exist. Interesting thought. The brain tricks you in a lot of ways for your own good. Sound and light reach you at a very different speeds. Kind of like this, if you're watching this on Facebook, I think sound and light actually reach at different speeds too. A phenomenon we experience every time we hear a plane passing overhead and look up to find the sound coming from one part of the sky in a plane moving silently through another. And a plane moving silently through another. In the more immediate world around you, your brain normally irons out these differences so that you can sense all stimuli as reaching you simultaneously. How interesting is that? You know what he's talking about right there? He's saying, like, if a plane flies over and you look up where you think you hear the sound, what you have to do is look way up in front of it where the plane actually is, because the plane moved and the sound moved and those things hit you at a different moment. But when you get down close to yourself, that's still happening down here on ground level, but your brain is working all that stuff out for you so that you have a better understanding of what's going on in your environment. It's kind of cool how that actually works. In a similar way, the brain manufactures all the components that make up our senses. It's a strange, non-intuitive fact of existence that photons of light have no color. Sound waves, no sound. Olfactory molecules, no odor. As James LaFanu has put it, while we have the overwhelming impression that the greenness of the trees and the blueness of the sky are streaming through our eyes as through an open window, yet the particles of light impacting on the retina are colorless, just as the waves of sound impacting on the eardrum are silent, and scent molecules have no smell. They are invisible, weightless, subatomic particles of matter traveling through space. All the richness of life is created inside your head. Is that scary for some of y'all? It's a little scary for me, right? All that stuff. Think about that for a second. Do you see what he's saying right there? It's like the particles of light impacting the retina are colorless. It's like, whoa, all this stuff out here that I'm seeing that's right in front of me, this red shirt that I'm wearing, it's just traveling through there's no color in this that's going through here. It's colorless. But when it hits our eyeball, then our eyeball turns it into colors. And some of us are colorblind. And think about how colorblind works. Colorblind's not blind out there. It's not the red shirt that's sending off the wrong signal to the colorblind person. It's the red shirt sending off the signal, and the colorblind person having some sort of difference in their eyeball where they actually can't tell what color it is. That's an interesting concept if you think about it. So, um, what you see is not what it is, but what your brain tells you it is. If we really understood that, can you think we get along with each other a little bit better? Like, how many times we just get fussy with somebody because they just didn't see it the same way that we saw it. They don't understand it the same way that we understand it. And we've got a brain that's been through all of the experiences of our life, and they have a brain that's been through all the experiences of their life. And what's common sense to us is not necessarily common sense to them. And it's like if we could just understand that it's all of this environment that we think we're so certain of is being transferred inside our brain. It's like our brain is working all that stuff out. And then each brain is different. And so each brain sees things just a little bit differently. And it's the beauty of life, but it is also something that's irritating. Hey, we're coming up on a break. We'll be right back right after these messages with Life with Jason Clemmons, DC, on 98.7 Walk by Faith Radio and 1420 AM Lubbock Christian Nation. All right, we got just a minute break. I'll just keep going right here, and then we'll move along. But um, it's not what you see, but what your brain tells you it is. That's what the world is, and that's not the same thing at all. Consider a bar of soap. Has it ever struck you that soap lather is always white, no matter what color the soap is? That isn't because the soap somehow changes color when it's moistened and rubbed. Molecularly, it's exactly as it was before. It's just that the foam reflects light in a different way. You just get the same effect with crashing waves on a beach, greeny blue water, white foam. And that's lots of other phenomena. That's because color isn't a fixed reality, but a perception. We had that dress that came through a few months back. And that dress that came through was some people thought it was blue and some people thought it was gold or whatever. And and if you know what I'm talking about, like it like you get in serious arguments over that. Like we had some serious arguments, and in our own house, I think Leslie saw it different than Caitlin and I saw it, or something like it was. And it's so interesting because that's it. I would argue that Leslie sees lots of things different than I see them. And it's like, well, I must be right because I see them the way that I see them. And she sees them totally different. And then she thinks that she must be right. And neither one of us are right. We're right, or we're both right, actually, because we're both seeing it in our own head and both processing it in our own head. And that's the way that it actually works. That's an interesting thought right there, right? You have probably at some time or another encountered one of those illusion tests that requires you to stare for 15 or 20 seconds at a red square. Then you shift your vision to a blank sheet of paper, and for a few moments you will see a ghostly square of greenish blue on the white paper. This after image is a consequence of tiring some of the photoreceptors in your eyes by making them work extra intently. But what is relevant is that the greenish blue color is not there and has never existed anywhere but in your imagination. In a very real sense, that is true of all colors. It's interesting concept. It's interesting information right there. I didn't know that. I didn't really understand that in that kind of depth. And so reading the book, I think it's great. There's stuff that I learned from this. Every time I read a book, there's something new that I learned from it. Hang on, we're coming back on the show. Hey, everybody, we're back. This is Jason Clemmons, Doctor of Chiropractic on the Rock Health and Wellness Center, and you're listening to Life with Jason Clemmons, DC. and this is Thursday, November 16th. We're breaking down The Body by Bill Bryson. We're trying to get through chapter 5, The Brain. And so we're just talking about some of the colors. And we were talking about how your brain processes color, and and um, and everybody processes that just a little bit differently. So if you see something that's not exactly like somebody else sees it, it's okay. Like, that's all right. Your brain is also extraordinarily good at finding patterns and determining order in chaos, as these two well-known illusions show. There's a dog, there's a Dalmatian dog that's underneath a tree, and it's a really interesting picture. Um, and it's the first illustration. Most people see only random smudges until it's pointed out to them that the picture contains a Dalmatian dog. Then suddenly, for nearly everyone, the brain fills in the missing edges to make sense of the whole composition. We we see it. All we see is a bunch of dots on the page. But then after we look at it for a second, then our brain puts it together and sees that. I just think it's amazing, really. The illusion dates from the 1960s, but no one seems to have kept a record of who first created it. The second illustration does have a known history. It's called a Canizza triangle, after an Italian psychologist, Gaetano Canizza, who created it in 1955. There is, of course, no actual triangle in the picture except for the ones your brain puts there. So you could look that up, Kanizza, and you could look that up and actually see that there's not a triangle there. Your brain just sees two triangles overlapped on top of each other, but there's really not one there. Your brain does all these things for you because it's designed to help you in every way. Yet paradoxically, it is also strikingly unreliable. Some years ago, a psychologist at the University of California at Irvine, Elizabeth Loftus, discovered that it is possible through suggestion to implant entirely false memories in people's heads, to convince them that they were traumatically lost in a department store or shopping mall when they were small, or that they were hugged by Bugs Bunny at Disneyland. Even though these things never happened, Bugs Bunny is not a Disney character and has never been at Disneyland. She could show many people pictures of themselves as a child in which the image had been manipulated to make them look as if they were in a hot air balloon, and often the subjects would suddenly remember the experience and excitedly describe it, even though in each case it was known that it had never happened. There's a lot of that going on now with AI, right? That there's a lot of stuff that you see on Twitter and Facebook and all that stuff that's not real. And I'm real. If you're watching me on Facebook, I am actually here. I'm real. I didn't AI myself to make this show up right here. Um, but that's really kind of the kind of interesting. Some of the things that we can do by suggestion or just by repetition and saying it over and over, and then pretty soon that we believe that was us. That's really interesting um, concept. Now, you might think that you could never be that suggestible, and you'd probably be right. Only about one third of the people are that gullible. But other evidence shows that we all sometimes completely misrecall even the most vivid events. In 2001, immediately after the 9/11 disaster at the World Trade Centers in New York, psychologists at the University of Illinois took detailed statements from 700 people about where they were and what they were doing when they learned of the event. 1 year later, the psychologists asked the same question of the same people and found that nearly half now contradicted themselves in some significant way. Think about that. Like, it's something as traumatic and significant as the World Trade Centers, and then 1 year later, you found nearly half contradicted themselves in some significant way. The way that we saw the story, it wasn't the way that the story actually happened, and that's a way that we get trapped. And I've been guilty of that myself. That's a way that we get trapped in the past, and then we remember things happening a certain way, and someone else, and when we're mad at some, like our spouse or a friend or something, that happened 10 years ago. And they're talking about in 1 year. In 1 year, they found people that nearly half of the people contradicted themselves in some way. Now, we're not going to believe that we're the half, right? If we're the ones that were in the half that contradicted ourselves, then we're not going to believe that. That's not going to be the way that we see it, because we're the ones that were right. But if half the people contradicted themselves, maybe the way that we saw the event isn't exactly the way we remembered it. I mean, is there enough data? Is there enough studies to get us to at least to consider the idea that maybe the way that we remember the event could be different than the event was? And so now what we're doing is we're putting ourselves, that we're in the moment, the person that we are today, the way that we feel about things today, the way that we think about things today, and we're projecting ourselves back into a moment in time when we don't remember how we were feeling when that was happening. It could have been totally it might the point of that is that it'd be perfectly fine to let it go and move on. Just get on down the road with it, because it's not, you can't win. You can't it's not going to, you're not going to solve the problem. It's just like, and I'm as guilty as anybody here when it comes to something like that. I just carry it on and carry it on and carry it on because I want to figure it out. My brain wants to figure it out because it's in that unknown space right there. And so, and he has a little deal here. He says, um, I, for my part, vividly recall watching the events live on television in New Hampshire, where we were then living with two of my children, only to learn that one of those children was in fact in England at the time. Isn't that interesting? If you ask him, he remembers watching the TV with his kids, but one of his kids was in England. Memory storage is idiosyncratic and strangely disjointed. The mind breaks each memory into its component parts: names, faces, locations, context, how a thing feels to the touch, even whether it's living or dead, and sends the parts to different places, then calls them back and reassembles them when the whole is needed again. A single fleeting thought or recollection can fire up a million or more neurons scattered across the brain. Moreover, these fragments of memory move around over time, migrating from one part of the cortex to another for reasons entirely unknown. It's no wonder we get details muddled. Do you get what he's saying right there? When we create a memory, we create it in multiple different kind of parts. We create it in fragments, in the names, faces, locations, context, how a thing feels to the touch, even whether it's living or dead. All those are stored in our brain in fragments. And then when we want to recall them, then we recall them, and we have to make sure that we get all of those fragments put back together exactly the way that it was in order to remember that moment. And it's really hard to do that. It's really hard to remember exactly the way that moment was. Now, we have some memories that we just love. They're not all negative memories. Some memories we just love, but even the memories we love, we kind of make up. They're not exactly the way that we remember them. Memories are categorized in many different ways, and no two authorities seem to use the quite same terminology. The most frequently cited divisions are long term, short term, and working for duration, and procedural, conceptual, semantic, declarative, implicit, autobiographical, and sensual for type. Fundamentally, however, memories come in two principal varieties: declarative and procedural. Declarative memory is the kind you put into words: the names of state capitals, your date of birth, how to spell ophthalmologist. He's funny. Procedural memories describe the things you know and understand but couldn't so easily put into words: how to swim, drive a car, peel an orange, identify colors. Those are the two different types of memory. Working memory is where short term and long term memories combine. Recognition memory is actually useful because it doesn't clutter the brain with unnecessary details, but does help us to remember where we can find those details if we should need them again. Short term memory is really short, no more than a half a minute or so for things like addresses and phone numbers. If you can still remember something after half a minute, it's no longer technically short term memory, it's long term. Most people's short term memory is pretty abysmal. Six random words or digits is about all that most of us can reliably retain for more than a few minutes. Remember that, for that's one of the few things that I remember from my undergraduate work. And I was thinking, and I didn't remember it exactly right because I thought it was seven, because I thought that's why our all of our phone numbers were seven digits. And because it was something that we could remember from a short term. So that's kind of interesting on memory. I want to keep going because there's interesting stuff ahead in this chapter. What is certainly true is that we retain a great deal more than we can easily summon to mind. You may not recollect much of your neighborhood you lived in when you were small, but if you went back and walked around it, you would almost certainly remember very particular details you hadn't thought about for years. With sufficient time and prompting, we would probably be astonished at how much we have stored away inside of us. I had that experience. I actually went back to Del City, Oklahoma one time when I was a kid after we had moved away for several years. And as soon as we got back, and I didn't even drive, we left there when I was in fourth grade, right after fourth grade. And I didn't even drive when I was there. But when I got there, when I got back, I was like, man, I know exactly where we are. We should turn here. We used to live right there, like turn right there. And we went right back to my old house with that memory right there. Um, the person for whom we learned a good deal of what we know about memory was, ironically, a man who had very little of it himself. Henry Moliason was an amiable and good looking young man of 27 in Connecticut who suffered from crippling episodes of epilepsy. In 1953, inspired by the efforts of Wilder Penfield in Canada, a surgeon named William Scoville drilled into Molison's head and removed half of the hippocampus from each side of his brain and most of the amygdala. The procedure greatly reduced Malaysian seizures, though it didn't entirely eliminate them, but at the tragic cost of robbing him the ability to form new memories, a condition known as anterograde amnesia. Malaysian could recall events from his distant past, but had almost no capacity for new memories. That's really crazy right there. Someone who left the room would immediately be forgotten. Even a psychiatrist who saw him almost daily for years was a new person each time they met him. That's what your brain does for you right there. And actually, exercise increases hippocampus. So the hippocampus part of your memory, if you're starting to lose your memory, maybe you could just exercise. That would be a great way for you to gain your memory back. But what scientists learned from Malayson was not so much how memory works as how difficult it is to understand how it works. What is surely the most striking feature of the brain is that it's the higher processes, thinking, seeing, hearing, and so on, happen right at the surface, the 4 millimeter thinking sheath of the cerebral cortex. A person who was first mapped this area was a German neurologist named Corbin Brodmann in 1868 to 1918. Brodmann was one of the brilliant and least appreciated of modern neuroscientists. In 1909, while working at the Research Institute in Berlin, he painstakingly identified 47 distinct regions of cerebral cortex, which have been known ever since as Brodmann areas. Rarely in the history of neuroscience has a single illustration been as influential. That was a quote in Nature Neuroscience. His career was further sidetracked with an outbreak of World War I, when he was sent to work in a mental asylum. Finally, in 1917, at the age of 48, his luck turned. He landed an important job as the head of the Department of topographical anatomy at the Institute in Munich. At last, he had the economic security to get married and have a child, both of which he did in short order. Brodmann enjoyed not quite a year of unaccustomed serenity. In the summer of 1918, 11 and a half months after his marriage, 2.5 months after the birth of his child, at the very height of his happiness, he contracted a sudden infection. Within 5 days, was dead. He was 49 years old. One of the best neuroscientists in the world got an infection and died. That's kind of interesting. Incidentally, the idea that we only use 10% of our brains is a myth. I think that I agree with that too. No one knows where the idea came from, but it has never been true or close to true. You may not use it all terribly sensibly, but you employ all your brain in one way or another. That concept that if we could just use more than 10% of our brain, we would be super smart. And that's not really how it works. The brain takes a long time to form completely. A teenager's brain is only about 80% finished, which may not come to as a great surprise to the parents of the teenager. Although most of the growth of the brain occurs in the first 2 years and is 95% complete by the age of 10, the synapses aren't fully wired until the young person is in his or her mid to late 20s. This means that teenagers' years effectively extend well into adulthood. In the meantime, the person in question will almost certainly have more impulsive, less reflective behavior than his elders and will also be more susceptible to the effects of alcohol. I do not understand it. This is one of my preaching moments right here. But I do not understand why parents let their children drink alcohol. It's one of the craziest things. It's always been that way. I think since the history of time. But it's like I don't know, like why would you let your teenager drink alcohol? And you can say, well, it's like because let me go on for a second. The teenage brain is not just an adult brain with fewer miles on it. Francis E. Jensen, a neurology professor at Harvard Magazine in 2008, it is rather a different kind of brain altogether. That's exactly right. A teenager's brain is a brain that's completely different altogether. The nucleus accumbens, a region of the forebrain associated with pleasure, grows to its largest size in one's teenage years. At the same time, the body produces more dopamine, the neurotransmitter that conveys pleasure, than it ever will again. That's why the sensations you feel as a teenager are more intense than any other time of life. But it also means that seeking pleasure is an occupational hazard for teenagers. The leading cause of death among teenagers is accidents, and the leading cause of accidents is simply being with another teenager. When more than one teenager is in a car, for instance, the risk of accidents multiplies by 400%. Like we've got those rules in society that people don't want to follow because they think they're stupid. But it's like neuroscience, right? And it's so interesting to me, like just that sentence on alcohol. It's like I've known my whole life 18, 19-year-old kids whose parents let them drink, buy alcohol for them, don't care nothing about it if they are drinking, don't they have no problem with them drinking whatsoever, and it's like their brains are not even developed properly. I mean, you wouldn't let them drink when they're 3. Why let them drink when they're 18? I don't know. It's my own thing. It's completely possible too, because we didn't drink in my house. I didn't drink a single drop of alcohol till I was 21. It's like, yeah, because I was scared of my dad. That's why I didn't drink it. And then after a while, it became my identity, and that's why I didn't drink it. And my kids don't drink, and we never have. It's like it doesn't even make any sense to me. So anyway, everybody's heard of neurons, but so many. What actually holds your brain together is glia or glia cells, which is a little odd because they outnumber neurons by 10 to 1. The word means glue or putty, and the cells that support neurons in the brain and central nervous system. But now it's known that they engage in a lot of important chemistry from producing myelin to clearing away waste. Those glial cells are really important right there. Let me see if I can see where I am because I want to get to this lobotomy stuff. I'll try to hurry. There's quite a lot of disagreement whether the brain can make new neurons. A team at Columbia University, led by Bolderini, announced in early 2018 that the brain's hippocampi definitely produced at least some new neurons. But a team at the University of California at San Francisco came to precisely the opposite conclusion. The difficulty is that there is no certain way of telling whether neurons in the brain are new or not. What is beyond doubt is that even if we do make some new neurons, it is nothing like enough to offset the kind of loss you get from general aging. Never mind stroke or Alzheimer's. So we literally, to all intent and purpose, once you pass early childhood, you have all the brain cells that you're ever going to have. So why would you want to speed up losing brain cells? Like that really doesn't make any sense. That's not something that we really want to do. Um, Let me get to this part. Um, there's talking about this guy. Um, let's see. So, for all its marvels, the brain is curiously undemonstrative as a curiously undemonstrative organ. The heart pumps, the lung inflates and deflates, the intestines quietly ripple and gurgle. The brain just sits like putty, leaving and giving away nothing. It's hardly surprising that our understanding of how the brain functions was slow in coming and largely inadvertent. One of the great, and it must be said most written, events was in 1948 in Vermont when a young railroad builder named Phineas Gage was packing dynamite into a rock and it exploded prematurely, shooting 2 foot of tamping rod through his left cheek and out the top of his head before it clattered back to earth about 50 feet away. The rod removed a perfect core of the brain about an inch in diameter. Miraculously, Gage survived and appeared not even to have lost consciousness, though he did lose his left eye and personally was forever transformed. Previously a happy-go-lucky popular, he was now moody, argumentative, and given to profane outbursts. He was just, quote, no longer Gage, as one of his old friends reportedly said. As often happens to people with frontal lobe damage, he had no insight into his condition and didn't understand that he had changed. Unable to settle, he drifted from New England to South America and on to San Francisco, where he died at the age of 36, falling prey to seizures. The point of that part right there is that think about that for a second. Do you know a moody, argumentative, and person that's given to profane outbursts? Right? And what we say is, man, that dude's a punk, or I hate that person. And that woman, she sure is witchy, right? Like if we could stop for just a second and really understand, that's more likely brain function than it is personality, I think. I think we would learn a lot more about people if we understood the definition of how these brains actually worked. And we could understand that, hey man, that look, they're moody, argumentative, and given to profane outbursts because their frontal lobe's not working properly. Now, it doesn't mean you could excuse the behavior, but at least you could kind of understand what was happening right there. Gage's misfortune has been the first proof that physical damage to the brain could transform personality. But over the following decades, others noticed that when tumors destroyed or impinged upon parts of the frontal lobes, the victim sometimes became curiously placid and serene. Yeah, that's really interesting. A Swiss physician named Burkhardt surgically removed 18 grams of brain from a disturbed woman, in the process turning her, in his words, from a dangerous and excited, demented person to a quiet, demented one. He tried the process on 5 more patients, but 3 died and 2 developed epilepsy, so he gave up. 50 years later, in Portugal, a professor of neurology at the University of Lisbon decided to try again and began experimentally cutting the frontal lobes of schizophrenics to see that if they're having trouble. um, because they had troubled minds. He was the inventor of the frontal lobotomy. That's what I mean. He overtook operations without having any idea what damage it might do. This guy just went around and started poking ice picks into people's heads, and then after a period of time, everything fell apart for them. Man, that's the end of the show. I know it was kind of boring, but I hope you got something from it, and I hope you guys have a good night. And we will see you guys tomorrow night at 6. So have a great night.